you have followed me through this entire series, great. If you haven't, I highly recommend that you back up and go through each one in order. There's a lot of information covered. Now, let's revisit several things that I have presented in the previous studies so we can bring them to Nebuchadnezzar's dream. First is my list from part 3 based on the spiritual meaning of 4. 4 denotes a foundation. So on the first 4 days of creation, God designs a foundation for the living creatures created on the 5th and 6th days. As shown, the natural testifies of the spiritual, the first 4 days of creation, reflecting the spiritual application of God's wisdom and understanding, counsel, and might. Out of God's wisdom and understanding proceeds the creative process of sowing and reaping, which is God's counsel to you and me. As Paul said, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that will he also reap. As far as we're concerned, everything begins with a seed. This is an indisputable law of nature in both the visible and invisible realms of our existence. This principle is the underpinning of God's might, the 2 covenants, old and new. The law corresponds to sowing to our flesh, and the spiritual nature of it corresponds to sowing to the Spirit. Wisdom, understanding, counsel, and might are God's methodology. Wisdom, righteousness, sanctification, and redemption are the result of his methodology. Let me remind you, the spirit of wisdom is joined to understanding, while the spirit of counsel to might. This is not coincidental, but there's another pattern in Scripture quite illuminating in its own right, the simple pattern of 2. 2 denotes division or witness. That being said, division is found on all 6 days of creation, God separating one thing from another. This division finds its way into our human form. We have 2 eyes, ears, nostrils, arms, hands, legs, and feet. However, our body is divided. It's just one body. So this brings to mind the purpose of division, which ultimately is unity. Perhaps the best example is Adam and Eve. God made the woman from the man, starting with 1, then becoming 2, and afterward, Adam declaring they would become one flesh. First 1, then 2, then 1 again. That's 4, pointing at the foundation. Might this suggest the purpose of the foundation? So what's my point in this? Go back to the spirit of wisdom and understanding. 2 characteristics joined in spirit, so they are one in essence. The same is true for the spirit of counsel and might. So, within the scope of the first 4 characteristics or foundation, there's just 2. Keep this in mind for a moment. Now, let's come back to the Garden of Eden, symbolic of the 2-fold principle of sowing and reaping. Just as sowing and reaping is one principle with 2 outcomes, so the Garden of Eden matches, being one garden with 2 trees, the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. Do these 2 trees correspond to the 2 outcomes of sowing and reaping? They do. As we learned, the tree of knowledge represents God's law, while the tree of life represents the spiritual essence of his law, which is love. 2 trees, but just one, as illustrated by the following. As you can see, I've added the principle of sowing and reaping to this illustration, along with the understanding that the natural is first, followed by the spiritual. Of course, the cross is perfect in illustrating the 2-fold nature of the law. As Romans 7:14 shows, the tree of knowledge or law becomes the tree of life when we conduct ourselves by its spiritual nature. Now, let me bring in this illustration regarding the spirit of wisdom and understanding and the spirit of counsel and might. Do you see in this illustration how God's wisdom and understanding are obtained by means of his counsel and might, the second leading to the first? So the tree of knowledge is his counsel and might, corresponding to the letter of the law, while the tree of life is his wisdom and understanding, corresponding to the spirit of it. This gives more weight to the following. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. How much better to get wisdom than gold? To get understanding is to be chosen rather than silver. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom. And with all that getting, get understanding. Well, my friend, there appears to be more to the cross than what we first realized, right? That being said, this takes us to the following. For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. The message of the cross. As we see, it's not a new message, but an old one. First portrayed as the principle of sowing and reaping and expanding into the construct of the two covenants. First the law, followed by Christ, walking in its spiritual essence, showing us that our death to self leads to life for others. I am reminded of the following. Beloved, I am writing you no new commandment, but an old commandment that you have had from the beginning. The old commandment is the word that you have heard. How does John say it? He's not writing a new commandment, but an old one that we've had from the beginning. Following with this. Let what you heard from the beginning abide in you. If what you heard from the beginning abides in you, then you too will abide in the Son and in the Father. Evidently, what was heard from the beginning is very important, for if it abides in us, then we will abide in the Son and in the Father. What is it, John? What have we heard from the beginning? John tells us, this is the message that you have heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. Here we are, my friends, the message we have heard from the beginning. We should love one another. That's it for this study, but much more to come, so be sure to join me next time as we'll bring all of this to Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Till then, may God bless you in your walk with Christ.